The Huw Edwards scandal has deepened tonight, and it begs the question how this man was ever allowed to run riot under the BBC's watch. It's now been reported the disgraced former Beeb star allegedly sexually assaulted a 27-year-old man in the toilets of a posh club after sending him sordid text messages. It's alleged Edwards, 62, met up with a man behind his wife's back before groping him in a West End members club. The man, aged 27 at the time, told the Daily Mail, "One of the most shocking things was how brazenly aggressive he was. I think he got off on the fact that he was a powerful figure and that he could get away with grabbing me in the toilets like that." Before the meeting, Edwards allegedly bragged, "You're getting assaulted in the Ivy. I'm so effing horny, it's indecent." Edwards, who pled guilty to accessing a litany of vile child sex abuse images this month, also said he felt, quote, very possessive about the 27-year-old, warning he would kill anyone who looked at him. The alleged victim described the encounter as overwhelmingly predatory and said he broke off contact with Edwards shortly afterwards. So look, the Edwards scandal is the latest in a long line of paedophile sagas dating back decades to have marred the BBC's reputation. Jimmy Savile, Jonathan King, Stuart Hall, Chris Denning, Rolf Harris, and now, again tonight, Huw Edwards. Has the BBC got a problem? Let's get the thoughts of my panel tonight. Writer and broadcaster Nina Miskov, former newspaper editor and media consultant Neil Wallace, and journalist and commentator Aidan McGee. Neil, I'll start with you as the former Fleet Street man. Nina, you, of course, the Queen of Fleet Street. Neil, what do you make of this? Has the BBC got a problem?
I think they've got a particular kind of problem, which is that they worship their stars, and their stars can do whatever they like. And so they protect them at all costs. Those stars know that, and because they are the face of the biggest media organisation in Britain, arguably the world.
156 million reach worldwide, I believe, the BBC. It's huge, absolutely enormous.
So it makes them feel very powerful, and they are. And eventually they start believing they can walk on water. And the truth is they can walk on water. That litany of names you just read out, how did all of those people get away with it so long? And how did this one? And incidentally, this is an interesting story today. This will not be the only instance like this. There will be many more, because people who behave like that do not actually do it as a one-off.
Hang on a minute, Neil. So you think there's more potential predators in the BBC?
No.
More stories about Huw Edwards.
There will be more stories about Huw Edwards that are exactly like that. Do I believe there's other predators at the BBC? I think there are people who've abused their position at the BBC, yes.
It's not dissimilar to sport. If you're, in football, Neil would know he covered sport in his papers down the years, and often footballers crept onto the news pages. If you're delivering results on the pitch, you'll be amazed what you can be forgiven for. And it's not just a BBC problem. We've all worked in organisations where the people at the top are delivering, they're performing well, and so their excesses, that we might put it in inverted commas, are just tolerated that little bit more, in fact, in a big way. And also you have a series of acolytes around them. They're feeding off the fame of that particular individual. They know the key to their success is hanging on their coattails. We see it all the time. There's a chain of command, there's a hierarchy, and you have to absorb yourself in that to get to the top, and people will do whatever they can. It's a brave person, Ben, to stick their neck on the line when you're down there and say this is wrong, because you know, unless you're really stupid, that you're going to be out the door pretty quickly. And that's how the whole culture proliferates.
Well, in the BBC's defence, of course, they say they didn't know what Huw Edwards was up to, of course. They would never have known. And they're now, Nina, trying to claw back not just the £200,000 he was paid in licence fee cash between November and April when he was arrested, but, of course, this £300,000 a year pension that he's going to be getting. Tim Davie has said he'll be getting that pension regardless of whether he's banged up for 10 years or not, because they can't do anything about it.
I think that's completely wrong. And to be fair to the BBC, although why I should be, I have no idea, ITV also worship their stars. Anybody who makes them money,
yes,
is a golden goose, and they do.
I think it's the same in most organisations.
Exactly. But the things, and also we're talking about Jimmy Savile. He fooled not only the BBC, he fooled Margaret Thatcher, he fooled
Prince Charles.
Absolutely. So he fooled everybody. So it's not just let's go for the BBC because they are particularly susceptible to this. These men are particularly good at,
They're manipulators.
There's Savile. Not sure that's the man I wanted to be looking at on a Saturday night with his...
Well, I've met him, and
Savile?
Yes, I met him. He was I thought he was just totally creepy. I just didn't...
Yeah, I met him too.
Just creepy.
But so many people say that. Their experiences of Savile were akin to yours. Louis Theroux said that he knew at some point he was a wrong 'un. Loads of other people have.
I didn't know he was a wrong 'un. I just thought he was a creepy...
It's hindsight, though. It's hindsight, though, as well. You don't necessarily... You can put yourself in that position and say, oh, yeah, I have my suspicions, but did you really? I'm not sure.
I think there's a truth in that. I think you can meet people and are uncomfortable because they're uncomfortable people. And then years later, maybe a story like Savile will come out and you think, that makes sense. People just make you feel uncomfortable.
I interviewed Rolf Harris once. I sat down with him for an hour. And I have to say, I didn't feel any kind of, oh, God, this man's a predator of any kind, or... there was nothing at all remote.
They need to have some charm about them if they're going to get people to do things they don't want to do.
He had enormous charm. And I once sat next to him at a charity dinner. I think there was his wife the other side. And felt there was nothing untoward about him.
Apparently, Vanessa Feltz, as far as I remember, said that she felt something was slightly off with Rolf Harris at one point.
Oh.
But, it's, as you said, in hindsight, it's a wonderful...
Of course it is.
I just wonder, the BBC, of course, they've said that they had no idea this was going on under Huw Edwards. But, if more of this happens in the coming years at the BBC, do we need some sort of inquiry or... because this is essentially taxpayer money funding this organisation, and their track record thus far isn't good.
The problem is that, we've all worked in office situations and people start to get a bit of a reputation if they're creepy and there's something untoward about them. The problem with big organisations and big stars in big organisations is there is a fear, as Aidan quite rightly mentioned, there is a culture to protect them and excuse them and to be fearful of rocking the boat. You hear it all the time. You read about it in law firms. You've seen it in, a major figure in McDonald's, wasn't it, in America, had to resign because it turned out he was having affairs with junior employees.
In the position of that person at the bottom, you're tossing away your career, because if you're asking the person in the overarching position of the organisation to make a choice between somebody down here or someone up there, we both know who they're going to go for. We all know they're going to go for.
And the thing is, it starts kind of gradually, because when the career takes off and somebody's a success, and if they have little foibles, like they only want,
certain makeup artists.
Or they only want somebody to
floor managers,
coffee in this particular mug, little tiny things.
Yeah.
And then it gets bigger and bigger, so that everything that they want...
Demanding.
That's going to make them perform, to make the company money... is tolerated somehow, short, obviously, of people. But I wonder how many people at the BBC must have known of Huw Edwards' proclivities, that he was, more interested in young men than his wife.
Well, I've spoken to people who worked closely with Huw Edwards as recently as this week, and they said it was always obvious that he liked young men, but as far as the paedophilia aspect is concerned, no, they had no idea.
But it was... interesting that when this story started to break, there's a very, I give her due, a very brave presenter at the BBC called Victoria Derbyshire, who pursued on Newsnight, of which she was the main presenter. And she knew of incidents, and she pursued that story with one of the reporters because they had heard the rumours, they had heard the undercurrents, and they were able to follow it, and they put together actually a very important piece of television journalism that helped bring him down and helped expose him eventually.
But that's the difference, though, isn't it? It took somebody on sort of aligned to him or his kind of level in the organisation to bring him down. Nobody at the bottom was going to do that.
I remember that. It was in the early days when the Sun was still kind of drip-feeding information. They couldn't maybe get past the legalities of the story, so they were doing things sort of half-baked,
circumspect,
getting in a bit of a tangle for it. And then, of course, Victoria Derbyshire did the piece on Newsnight. I think it was about the reports or complaints from a young staff member.
Young staff members too.
Yeah. And I've got to say, props, again, I've said it before on this channel in recent weeks, props to the Sun for their reporting, props to Victoria Derbyshire.
Victoria Derbyshire is a
takes
wonderful
courage.
woman. She is so strong, and she was treated badly by the BBC before the pandemic. her morning show was dumped and she was pretty much washed up, as it were. Come the pandemic, they brought her back and she was an absolute stalwart.
And you know what? In the face of a absolute litany of lefty supporters, John Sopel, other people, Owen Jones, saying whatever happens behind closed doors is up to Huw Edwards. It doesn't matter. This is something about nothing. And actually, they've been left with egg on their face. Their judgment of characters.
And your earlier point was 100% right, and I praise you for it. The Sun showed immense courage in the current media atmosphere, in the current media ecosystem, if you like, to have the courage to pursue the story and not let it go, and to face up all of the barrage of big BBC figures, big media figures, trying to damage their story and beat them down.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't give in, and full praise to them.
Yep, it's the Sun what won it. Yeah, you go. Nina, Neil, Aidan, thank you very much. You'll be back with us very shortly.